Well, hello there, and welcome to the House of Hammer. So then, what do we have here? Well, my friends, it's something of a celebration party town in this old house tonight. Yes, that's right, we have hit our 50th Hammer movie! Way! Couldn't have planned that any better. To celebrate, I thought it only wise to involve everyone. So, not only am I welcoming... not only am I welcoming you lovely listeners to this particular episode, but I am also welcoming my lovely co-hosts, Ben Taylorson.
Hello.
And Mr. Cev Moore.
Hello.
Sorry, I should have put the enthusiastic Mr. Cev Moore. Well, welcome, gentlemen, to this pant-wettingly exciting episode, celebrating the fact that we have reached 50 films from Hammer Studios.
Just another 37 years to go and we'll be done.
Absolutely. So, for just a little bit of context from where we started to where we are now, Episode 1 on 1935's Mystery of the Mary Celeste was released on the 18th of May, 2021. Since then, we've flown through the Dick Bartons, the River Patrols, and the PC-49s of this world. We've encountered Ian Wilson, Sid James, Naomi Chance, Eleanor Summerfield, and Paul Carpenter, all becoming firm favourites of ours. Not to mention, of course, our beloved Hi Hazel. Hi Hazel.
Hi Hazel.
Hi Hazel.
We have seen a light be dark, a cloud burst, the death of an angel, and someone's face get stolen. We've also seen a friend and co-host depart, but also we've seen one host record a round table from an Airbnb, another discover they have a talent for impersonating a panda, getting its ears removed, and another see all of his valiant work destroyed when he deems to go on holiday. We've had 3 films in 1936, 4 films in 1948, 6 films in 1949, and a whopping 8 films in 1953. It has been a hell of a couple of years for us, gentlemen. But before we go on with the subject of today's film, I just wanted to get your thoughts on what it has meant to go on this journey through Hammer in this somewhat unique way. Ben, we'll start with you, my friend.
It's felt like a bit of an honour, actually, to shine a little light on some of these films that are rather forgotten and, you know, sort of championed by only a select few people. And I don't mean select in a sort of a prestigious way. I just mean in a very limited number of people who can remember these films or are aware of their existence. I was chatting the other day to someone talking about sort of the collective worth of Hammer's back catalogue and, you know, the fact that people tend to think only of the horrors. But I mean, you've already mentioned some of the products and the characters that we've discussed and the actors that we've had the pleasure of sort of talking about their work as well. And yeah, it's been an honour and a pleasure to be doing this with 2 of my best friends and to have mooched my way through films I would never otherwise have watched, let's be honest. And, you know, knowing that when we eventually get to the end, we'll have sat through, reviewed and, you know, sort of done work about every single film that Hammer ever did, is, you know, it keeps me motivated to keep going, and I'm thoroughly enjoying the ride thus far.
Absolutely wonderful. Kevin?
I'm quite envious of Smokey as far as your journey individually, because you're attacking it exactly in order. My viewing has been a bit scattershot, and like Ben, I'm used to the horror, but again, a complete voyage of discovery. Really enjoyed it so far, and I can't see that waning anytime soon. And let's face it, I mean, when else are you going to be able to dazzle people with your knowledge of the world's most starving man and the crank handle?
That's true. We have picked up so many facts along the way. I was about to say useless facts, but they're not useless facts. No fact is useless.
I think a quiet moment of reflection for the crap that we've covered thus far is necessary.
Yeah, there's only really been a handful of times when we've gotten together and we go, right, what segment are we doing this time? And it's sort of like, I don't know. I've got nothing. Yeah, but no, I echo both of your sentiments, especially along the lines of what an honor it is to do this. I mean, if anyone had done it before, we weren't aware of it, but that's not to say that their efforts weren't valiant as well. But yeah, to go through on this journey with, and not forgetting Adam as well, who started this endeavor with us. But yeah, as you say, with your best mates, to go through this and discover some wonderful films and discover some terrible films, but nevertheless, they just make up this wonderful tapestry of this studio that, whether rightly or wrongly, gets lumped with the horror constantly whenever you mention Hammer. Fair dues, but we've just proved that there was 20 plus years of content there before they properly got into the horror. And that's a lot. And as we just said, look how many films were released in those years, That's a hell of a lot of films. And some of them are absolute belters that I'm going to love for the rest of my life. And it is an absolute privilege to do this with you fine gentlemen. And I've thoroughly enjoyed the ride. And we've got a hell of a long way to go as well.
Can't wait for all the buses.
That's what everybody's here for.
Yeah. Well, actually, we should mention that and to sort of say thank you to all our listeners who have been with us on this journey, who continue to join us at different intervals and whatnot, and then of course our patrons. It's very, very it's very touching that they've decided to do so.
Absolutely,
and we will keep going. We certainly will. There we go. So, without any further ado, let us move on to the subject at hand. Our 50th film from 1956, X the Unknown. Somewhat infamously, X the Unknown is, known for almost being a direct sequel to Quatermass. Nigel Neal, Quatermass's writer, however, vetoed the use of his character. You could lazily join the dots to say he possibly could have been miffed due to the changes made to the previous incarnation. But if that was the case, they probably wouldn't have released a sequel in 1967 now, would they? After the runaway success of Quatermass, it only made sense for Hammer to dive headfirst into carrying on with this sci-fi horror malarkey. Much has been made during the last 65 years or so on whether this was Hammer also capitalising on Cold War anxieties, not to mention the diminishing national identity resulting from Britain's decrease in status as a world power. That, I think, can be left up to the individual viewer to decide. Jimmy Sangster, Hammer's production manager, was handed the task of coming up with a script. This was despite his protestations that he, quite truthfully, knew nothing about scriptwriting at the time. The boss's reaction was pretty clear. If he wrote something they liked, they would use it, and he would get paid for it. The gamble, as we shall find out, paid off. Production began in January of 1956. The original director, Joe Walton, was replaced at the last minute by Ealing director Leslie Norman. Unfortunately, this didn't create for a happy set. Dean Jagger, the lead in the film, detested Norman and continually refused to be directed by him. Hammer prided itself on having happy sets. Having a bullish Leslie Norman tramp around the set, yelling obscenities through a loudhailer, just wasn't the done thing. Despite this particular issue, and also throw in the horrible weather and just how cold it was at the beginning of that particular year, X the Unknown was completed on schedule and had its premiere on the 21st of September 1956. X the Unknown finds us in Scotland? A group of British soldiers are partaking in an exercise, taking it in turns to try and locate a hidden object that just happens to give off a small amount of radiation. The last soldier of the day happens to find another source of said radiation that really shouldn't be there.
I was just coming over to see you, Bannerman. Why haven't you got your men moving yet? They've missed all the transport back to camp.
There's something wrong here, sir. We're getting a reading on the counter where there shouldn't be one.
No?
It's strongest about here.
Where have you got your stuff buried?
Over there, sir, by the tree.
Right, let's have a look.
Lancing! Mark this spot with my stick, will you?
Very good, sir.
Hang on here.
Come on, Sergeant, where do you put it?
Somewhere around here, sir.
Try the counter, Mr. Bannerman.
Well, wouldn't you know it, the unidentified nastiness starts to make the ground bubble and eventually explode. The poor sap who was left to mark the spot is kerblammoed, while another soldier has some rather nasty burn marks left on his back. Cue the entrance of Dr. Royston, played by Dean Jagger, from the nearby Atomic Energy Laboratory, to see if he has any answers as to just what went on.
May I see those soldiers now?
Of course.
There's no radioactivity there now. You're quite sure there couldn't possibly have been some mistake?
Wait till you see those men. There's no mistake about them.
Back! Back! Whoa!
Mr. Bannerman, just a moment, please. This chap was nearest the explosion. We thought he was just a bit shaken up at first. Then these burns started breaking out. Not very pretty, is it?
No, it isn't. Thank you, boys. What about the other fella?
He's over here. He went back to fetch that one. He wasn't quite so near the explosion. Let's have a look at your back, old chap. What do you make of that, eh?
Were you carrying this when the explosion happened?
Yes, sir.
Excuse me.
All right, sir. Have you finished?
Yes, thank you.
All right, carry on, Sergeant.
Come along, old chap.
Major, I'd like to get some further equipment out here. I wonder now if there's any way that you could get a message back to my office.
Yes, I'll take care of it. I'll send it over the air to HQ. They'll phone it through from there.
Good.
Poor old Lansing's in a terrible state. Did you see him? Horrible.
I saw a man once fell up against the furnace door. Looked just about the same. He's passed over the noob.
Passed over the what?
Died.
Oh.
Screamed all night he did.
Yeah, do you mind? I'm just getting my tea.
Tea? We'll now be back in time for breakfast.
Such a heavy dose of radiation has a pretty catastrophic effect on anyone who comes into contact with it. But radiation is part of our everyday lives, isn't it? So how do we avoid going around looking like a pack of bacon that's been left out for a week? Well, to provide us with some answers, it's the man that we all don't mind coming into close contact with. It's the eternally cuddly Cev Moore.
In X the Unknown, there's loads of babbling about radiation and atomic bombs with Geiger counters all over the place, but at one point there's the mention of acceptable radiation. And that set off a little explosion in my tiny brain. Is there such a thing as acceptable radiation? The short answer would be yes. Thank you, and good night. But I wanted to know more than that, because I'm really that nosy, and it turns out there's 3 main types of ionizing radiation. That's the bad stuff, and not the type you warm your soup up with. Alpha radiation is heavy, positively charged particles emitting from elements such as uranium and radium. Alpha radiation is the least dangerous and can be stopped completely by a sheet of paper, a very natty House of Hammer t-shirt, or by the thin surface layer of our skin. Problems only start if you eat, drink, or snort them like a mad version of Tony Montana. Then, alpha radiation can cause some big-time biological damage. Then there's beta radiation, obviously. That consists of electrons. They're more penetrating than alpha particles because they're 8,000 times smaller and can even pass through a couple of centimetres of water. In general, though, a sheet of aluminium a few millimetres thick, or hiding under the front door you ripped down in case of a nuclear attack or Frankie Goes to Hollywood coming around for tea, will stop beta radiation fairly easily. As any fans of the Incredible Hulk will know, gamma rays are the angriest. They're electromagnetic radiation, similar to X-rays, light and radio waves. Gamma rays, depending on their energy, can pass right through the human body, but can be stopped by thick walls of concrete or lead. They're the most dangerous of the 3, but don't turn you green when you get stroppy. but gamma radiation will give you similar scabs to the ones seen in X the Unknown. Radiation is measured in sieverts, and 1 rad is equal to 0.01 sievert, if you've heard of a rad in relation to anything other than a skate park, that is. Now, if you're used to measuring in curies rather than pounds and ounces, a sievert is 3.7 times 10 to the power of 10 disintegrations per second curies, or to put it simpler, 1 brain-damaged House of Hammer host. Lifetime occupational exposure must not exceed 400 millisieverts. Anything even close to a whole sievert and you're toast. Low-level radiation is all around us all the time, thanks mainly to the cosmic rays from the sun, so you think you'd be safe in Scotland, but the higher the altitude, the higher the radiation. Go figure. Apparently, it's an offence under the Ionising Radiations Regulations Act of 2017 to exceed the acceptable self-dose limit. God, whether this is punishable by death or 10,000 years in a concrete box, the documents don't say, but it does explain why the feds are always chasing David Banner on the telly, and not because they thought he was simply bananas. Speaking of which, bananas are slightly radioactive because they're rich in potassium. Well, a bit of potassium-40 to be precise, which is of course radioactive. A lorry full of bananas is radioactive enough to trigger a false alarm on a detector looking for smuggled nuclear weapons. As your body naturally possesses and regulates the extra potassium, you'd have to eat a lorry load of bananas in one sitting, and in these conditions, it's not going to be the radiation that gets you. As an aside, in X the Unknown, it seems everyone has a Geiger counter. But is it really that easy to get hold of one? Well, I ended up on an MI5 list and cocked up my Amazon algorithm to boot by shopping for one. And there's loads, but they're quite expensive for a little box that just goes clicky clicky. So, in the best Blue Peter tradition, I decided to see if I could make one instead. And it's apparently quite simple, because a Geiger counter only uses a tube filled with inert gas at a very low pressure and some bits of high voltage wire running inside it. All I'd need is wire cutters, wire strippers, soldering iron, hot glue gun, loads of wire, an old transformer from an alarm clock, a Geiger tube, I found one of them on eBay, a 555 timer, apparently that's not from your alarm clock, some resistors and capacitors of various confusing names, any N-channel MOSFET, whatever that is, a few diodes including Xena diodes that have a cool name, and finally, a piezoelectric element, preferably from an old microwave and not the one you're using. Actually, as I can't make one with Meccano, I think I'd be safer buying one, and not so I can point it at my glow-in-the-dark watch. Let's get one thing straight. You can't get radiation sickness from your phone or your microwave or your watch or your ticky-ticky alarm clock, if they're still in one piece, that is, because they don't have the potential to create ionising radiation. That's where radiation knocks an electron off an atom like some kind of snooker trick, which creates an ion, and ions are the bad guys here when it comes to us watery meatbags. So, there's the long answer, and I'm going to sound more like Montgomery Burns now and say there is indeed an acceptable level of radiation.
Thank you, Kevy. Wonderful stuff, as always. For anyone who has seen X the Unknown, and as you will hear in the roundtable, the film does its best to ramp up the killings, the on-screen horror, and a few scenes of melty flesh here and there. Hammer really did have a bee in their bonnet, or should that be an X in their bonnet, to make use of the notorious X certificate that Quatermass had garnered, hence the title of the film. But just what do film certificates mean? And when did they start? Well, to fill us in on such naughtiness, it's my favourite X-rated star, bad boy, Ben Taylorson.
By the time X the Unknown was released, Hammer already had a prolonged relationship with the British Board of Film Classification. Owing to having to make several cuts in order to appease them in the past, Hammer had an informal agreement to submit scripts in advance of shooting for comment by the BBFC. When the draft script for the subject of our last episode, the Quatermass experiment, was submitted, Board Secretary Arthur Watkins replied, "I must warn you at this stage that while we accept the story in principle for the X category, we could not certificate, even in that category, a film treatment in which horrific element was so exaggerated as to be nauseating and revolting to adult audiences." The Quatermass experiment received an X certificate from the BBFC, restricting admission to persons over the age of 16. It was only the 12th film to receive that certificate since its introduction in 1951. Whereas other studios were somewhat wary of the X certificate, Hammer, who noticed the success of the similarly X-rated Le Diabolique in 1954, chose to exploit it. They dropped the E from experiment in the title of the film, and the tagline "X is not an unknown quantity" was used by Exclusive Films to sell the picture to cinema managers, urging them to exploit the excitement of the film. The Quatermass experiment went on to be a huge success, of course, so why not try the same trick with their next film? In fact, why not pander even further to the taboo nature of the X certificate with some on-screen face meltings and a severed head? That's a rhetorical question, by the way. In fact, let's put X in the actual title of the film and oversize it on the poster to drive home the point. And of course, X the Unknown does just that. At the time of X the Unknown's release, the X certificate hadn't actually been around that long, comparatively speaking. For context, let me take you through an abridged whistle-stop history of British cinematic classification. The BBFC, originally the British Board of Film Censors, was created in 1912. This was in order to create a standard form of national censorship, as up to this point, local authorities were each imposing their own and the standards varied widely. The first classification certificates were introduced in 1913. To begin with, there were two ratings. These were an unrestricted universal and an advisory adult rating. In 1932, an additional advisory rating, H to indicate horrific content, was introduced, as the genre became popular with studios such as Universal. As an aside, the popular horror movies podcast Rated H, featuring yours truly and some other bloke, derives its name from this type of cinematic rating. Horror films would actually be banned altogether a decade later, in the latter years of the Second World War, in case they damaged public morale. But it wasn't until the introduction of the X certificate, which then incorporated the H certificate in 1951, that certification became anything other than advisory. The X certificate decreed that audience members must be over the age of 16. BBFC Secretary John Trevelyan later admitted two mistakes had been made in defining the X certificate. The minimum age for admission should have been 18, and it should have had a different name, as the X tag was too suggestive, not least because it rhymed with sex. In 1970, the age limit for the X certificate films was raised from 16 to 18, and the restrictive AA rating was also introduced. This restricted admission to children who were 14 years and over and sat alongside the advisory A rating, which warned parents that the film may be unsuitable for young children, and the long-standing universal rating. In 1982, film certification as we largely recognise it today in Britain was introduced, with the introduction of the PG, 15, 18 and restricted 18 certificates for films containing more explicit sexual depictions. The same certification was applied to home videos in 1985, with the inclusion of a UC certificate to indicate content particularly suitable for unsupervised children. In 1989 for cinema and 1994 for home video, the 12 certificate was introduced, restricting viewing and distribution to people aged 12 and over. In 2002, the 12A certificate was introduced, replacing the 12 certificate in cinemas, stating no one younger than 12 may see a 12A film in a cinema unless accompanied by an adult. This, alongside the removal of the UC category in 2009 to replace by the BBFC Insights, a description of the film designed specifically for parents, marked a return to the advisory roots of the BBFC's film certification stance first seen a century before. So there we have it. The X rating as was doesn't really translate into the current BBFC certification. X-rated is now, when referring to movies, usually shorthand for pornographic material. More generally, the term refers to something that is grossly offensive, typically involving bad language, violence or sex. But in 1956, all you needed was a swollen rubber hand and some electric ooze. To give you a little bit more context, other films released in the 1950s that were granted an X certificate included Rebel Without a Cause, Yield to the Night, and Beat Girl. I'm sure you've heard of Rebel Without a Cause, and we've talked about Yield to the Night on this podcast before, but Beat Girl was something of a British equivalent of Rebel Without a Cause. The BBFC was not impressed with the film script about a teenage girl who seeks to rebel against her father by hanging around with a bad crowd in Soho, and the film's poster tagline is, "My mother was a stripper, I want to become a stripper too." The script was judged to be the product of squalid and illiterate minds. Several cuts were made before it was granted an X certificate in 1959. But more importantly than any of this, did the X trick work for Hammer with X the Unknown? Well, the reviews certainly picked up firmly on the horror elements, referring to the titular phenomenon as a creepy, oozing, crawling horror, a nasty old mess of radioactive something or other, and a horrible piece of work. All of which would help draw the audience in on the assumption that they might experience the delight of having their pants scared off them by an oozing radioactive wibbly.
Thank you, Ben. Some other bloke, eh? I kind of like that. That's going to go on my Tinder profile. Well, my friends, it is now time to adjourn to the round table. And, of course, joining me for that are Mr. Kevin Moore and everyone's favourite oozing radioactive wibbly, Mr. Ben Taylorson.
So as Smokey's already mentioned, this was originally intended to be a sequel to Quatermass. The question I'm going to ask you to kick off the roundtable is, does it feel so much like a sequel to Quatermass that it finds it difficult to sort of escape from the shadow of this huge hit that Hammer have had? Kev, how do you think that affects the film, sort of as a film in its own right? Do you think it can escape from that shadow?
No, is it the easiest way to put it? It's too close to Quatermass, which I'll get onto later, but it's almost like it's a budget knockoff and everybody's expecting it to be that. The problem is they've already set up this huge tent pole of a film and then they've come along with like a two-manner later on. It's just a little one at the side of the field. It's not half as well written. It's not half as well produced. It's nowhere near. I can see why everybody was objecting to it being released as a Quatermass film, or Quartermass, or Quatermass. Yeah, but no, I can see why Neil didn't want anything to do with this.
Before I answer that, I would like to ask you guys' opinion, because I'm assuming you're agreeing with Kev, Ben, because you were nodding your head when Kev was giving his reply.
I do to a certain extent. I think I think this film tries to differentiate itself enough to be an original product, but it's the formula is so similar that it's impossible not to basically sort of assume it is and refer to it as a sort of inferior copy of Quatermass.
Gotcha. Well, Quatermass.
That's sticking into it.
Yeah. Well, then, can I ask, do you think your answer is swayed at all by the fact that both of you have seen Quatermass in the Pit and I haven't?
Mine isn't.
Okay.
Genuinely, mine isn't. But it is swayed by the fact that we watched Quatermass only, sort of a couple of weeks before this. Had I watched them the other way around, that then maybe my opinion would have been slightly different.
Fair enough, because the feeling of what I got, because not having seen Quatermass in the Pit was, I can't stop saying Quatermass now.
It's catching.
It really is. And what I felt while watching X the Unknown was that it felt a little bit to me like, and if I hadn't known any of the backstory of it meaning to be a sequel, was that you could kind of imagine a scenario where Hammer looked at the success of Quatermass and went, well, let's just see if this isn't a fluke. Let's just put out something that's a little more low budget, not as high profile star, and whatnot, and let's see if we can strike gold again with a similar invasion, space invasion film, and see if it works. And regardless of the end quality of the product, the box office and the reviews and everything prove that it did work. And so you could logically look at it as then going, right, well, the goose that laid the golden egg, let's replicate that. And that's how Quatermass in the Pit came around.
That's a good way.
Well, that's the way I was looking at it when I was watching it, going, I'd do the same. If that was my studio, and it was just all like, well, look, we've done 20 years of film noir, which never, they were solid, most of them, but it was never a box office explosion. We've now got one, but it's like, well, is this just a one-off? Is this just a fluke? Let's try another horror. And then look what happened after this. They went straight back to the noir. Granted, it was in production beforehand, but still, that's kind of telling that they didn't abandon it completely. But there are things I enjoyed more in this than I did in Quatermass, and vice versa. So, for me, this is a really solid horror movie.
Ben's got a point, actually, because I have just noticed, I just realised that, we've watched these in such fast succession, and don't forget, I've been watching a load of Nigel Neal stuff as a build-up to the Quatermass film. So, over the last I would say last month, we've been gorging on Quatermass and that kind of side of it. That is something you could never do in 1955 to 1956. So the general public will have seen Quatermass in August 1955, and then they've got to wait another year for this coming out. So it's not going to be a case of people quite glibly
thinking it's Quatermass too.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just another sci-fi horror from Hammer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I've probably been a bit harsh, to be honest. I take it all back.
Well, I think one thing that for me, I'm not speaking for you. The issue I have with X the Unknown in comparison to Quatermass, largely, is the fact that is the monster. Okay, fundamentally, A, stupid, B, inconsistent. Now, let me flesh out my argument before I ask for the retort. So,
Ben, you're describing us two here, stupid and inconsistent.
Or who is who?
We know.
We take interns.
There's a scene when Dr. Royston explains what this monster is and where it's come from. And one of the characters is very skeptical, and he basically mirrors everything I'm thinking in that, well, yes, you're a man of science, and that's all nonsense. So they explain that the monsters come wibbling out of the ground. Sorry, that's the first wibbly of the day. To seek radioactive food. But then it's horribly inconsistent because it appears to change size as it fancies it. People die when they get close to the monster, but some people don't die when they get close to the monster. Others apparently have to be sort of squidged over by it. Others just need to get somewhere in the same postcode. There's a very handy line of, and it can kind of go invisible, should it choose to. Which is, can it? How do you know? I found the idea, my segment for the last podcast was all about sort of aliens inhabiting human-like bodies and then, absorbing people and becoming big, wardrobe monsters. And I find that fundamentally quite a scary concept. Something, a mud monster squidging out of a crack in the ground and then radioacting people to death. It's just not doing it for me, gentlemen. Smokey, how do you feel about the mud monster?
I agree. It's flimsy, isn't it? And we've done a little, thank you for the literature provided by Kev, but if you read into it a little more, it was literally a case of them going, well, we need an idea, go away and write one. It wasn't a pre-existing thing at first, and then to just flesh it out, they had another idea and put it all together, basically. And so, you're on we're going back to, a thing we talked about God knows how many times this, you're on a tight budget for a small studio. If we can do a sort of squidgy monster and we don't have the money to put it in Westminster Abbey again, I think for 56, this is all right, and it's a bit of mud, can be scary. Look, excuse me, Ben, you are the man who was scared of quicksand because it took a horse in the Never-Ending Story.
That wasn't quicksand. That was a swamp. Anyway, the point being, that is a fundamental fear. The fear of sinky sand.
Yeah, well, this is whoever wrote this may have had a fundamental fear of
Mudslides.
A flood of
Mudslides.
A flood of mud.
A mud flood.
I think Jimmy Sangster was just scared of Scotland.
Well, or just Scottish people. He just wanted to kill Scotland. So, either way. I'm not blind to the fact that it is inconsistent and it is a bit stupid. But I just take it for a B movie, and there's a hell of a lot worse threats in B movies over the years than this.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
yeah.
Are there?
Yes, of course there are.
To reel a few off?
We've seen
Not
plenty.
at the moment. No, we're in the flow.
give him time to compile a dossier and come back.
I don't have time for your nonsense.
Kevin, how do you feel about the mud monster?
Well, I find it quite prescient that the Mud Monster is 2 years before the Blob. That is very clever.
Patrons will be hearing more about that soon.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
It's actually a very clever way of getting around the costing of stuff. Because don't forget, Jimmy Sangster was actually a production manager before he started doing any writing. So his job was to cost everything out. So he knew exactly the cost of the location, the craft services, the actors, absolutely everything that goes in front and behind the camera. So when he's going to write this script, he already knows what's going on. So he's already thought, now I've got to make something really cheap. I've got to make a mud monster and, make it as inconsistent as possible and stupid as possible. But yeah, as daft as it seems, you look back through mud monsters and blobs like this and you think this is still getting used in Star Trek The Next Generation in 1987 when Tasha Yar gets killed.
Yeah,
I'll take your word for it, but
also the remake of the Blob wasn't until 88.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
But I mean, the problem I have, and I'm not going to linger too long on this point, otherwise the entire round table is going to be me whinging about the mud monster. But when you watch it more than once, and the first half of the film, it isn't actually revealed what the monster is. You just see people being shocked as something comes around the corner or something comes, into the X-ray room. And then, but on reflection, when we know it's a mud monster, it's just stupid because you just walk away from it. I was see in my mind's eye when I watched it for the first time. If I'd thought about it, I did actually know it was a mud monster because it's in the trailer. But I'd forgotten that, and I thought it was going to be like a pointy electricity man or something, like. But so I was quite disappointed when it was just some mud. But there we are.
Well, but the thing is though, is that as you say. Like we've talked about before, especially when it comes to sci-fi, as long as you put a reason in for why the way things are, you can get away with anything. Apparently it's the Looper theorem, isn't it? It's turning around and saying you won't understand time travel, so I just won't explain it to you.
Yeah,
it's exactly the same in this. So you're not going to understand this mud monster that can occasionally become invisible if it so chooses. And so, like when you're in a radiation room and someone's going and you can't see what's getting them, it's because it just happened to be invisible at that time.
Yeah,
solved. Problem solved.
No, because even when it's invisible, you can still hear it because it still makes that horrible crackling noise. Why does it make that noise? Why? And if it makes that noise all the time, why do they keep losing it?
Can I just say, watching this film, especially that open scene when they're searching for the radioactive device in quote-unquote Scotland, I watched it with headphones. It was like water torture because it just doesn't stop for the opening few minutes and my brain was leaking out of my ears because of the clicking of the radiation. It was just like... And then, of course, the second time I watched it, I did it again. I was like, oh, what are you doing? Take the headphones off.
Mud monsters aside, what I will give it credit for is the fact they really go after the sort of shock and gore element. You get two full-on people melting, and there's a child death. They're really going for it. Yeah, Kev, what do you reckon of that?
Well, bonus point straight away for child death. But yeah,
poor Willie.
He had it coming to him. You should never mess with things you don't know about, especially when it's all an old man's flask.
To be honest, he deserved to die for that accent alone.
Well, don't know what it was.
I'm surprised that Fraser Hines actually got away with his. Mind you, saying that, he ended up doing that same accent for about the next 50 years.
He did.
But, yeah, it's just stupid.
What, did you not even like the face melting? I love the face melting.
Oh, the face melt was great.
Oh yeah, the face melting is great. And because there's the
Put that on the poster.
yeah, Phil Leakey really knocked it out of the park with that. Because you've got the Watchman. I actually think the Watchman's death has more impact than the guy in the hospital. I thought that was better.
I love the fat radioactive finger. I thought that was cool.
They are obsessed with hands. It was the same in Quatermass. Anytime anything happened to anybody, it was hands first. They must have that big. It's the same. I'm telling you, it's the same prop. They just keep using the same prop hand.
It must be a makeup choice. It must be. It must be like it's such like an easy thing to do to create a digit and something wrong with it, and on a low budget.
Did Phil Leakey just specialise in hands? Is that what it was?
Well,
Yeah,
if he did, he's done them well.
yeah, it worked for Kenny Everett, didn't it?
Well, this is true. Yeah, all I'm saying, right? No, look, I'm not blind to this. I know it's a ridiculous monster. I know it's silly, but I'm just saying you've got to give it a little bit of a buy. I think in the fact that, all right, we don't know everything about it, but it's like every other, monster movie. It's like, right, you work out the basics, and then what do you do next? You work out how to kill it. So, that's pretty much it. And they did it in Quatermass. They did it in this too.
Did they? Did they kill it? No, they didn't.
Well, sort of. They blow it up.
They don't, because it blows up again. And then he goes, ooh, I wasn't expecting that. Because, of course, he's the world's greatest guesser and he doesn't know what he's doing.
I will give it you that. The ending is mind-boggling. I don't know what
It's so strange. I've watched it several times and I just don't know who chooses to end a film like that. Basically ending a film by going, whoops, don't know what happened there. And that's how the film ends.
Yeah.
Yeah, although, saying that though, Ben, something I will give it credit for, because I clocked the time as well, was that the proper ending of the film is the last half an hour of the film. It didn't rush. It took its time. And it was a really good build up this time.
It really does take its. Yes, I know that we were getting towards the conclusion and we still had 20 minutes to go. So it was nice that, they didn't pack it all the last 4 minutes just for a change.
Yeah.
Yeah, the final,
which we've had several times.
Yeah, the final bit in the field is 9 minutes 54 seconds. Yeah. You've just got them stood in a field for 9 minutes 54 seconds, looking at a guy in a jeep.
I know, but I thought that was great.
I don't like jeeps.
A slightly more serious question. Do you think the film's lost a little bit of its edge because we're no longer in the atomic age? I wondered whether the audiences of the 1950s might have found this slightly more intriguing or frightening because obviously, the atomic discussion was a newfound thing. It's a bit like looking back now on the Millennium Bug and it's just all going, that's a bit stupid, isn't it? I did wonder if it had that bit more bite because people were still sort of fascinated by what atomic science could do, and could it accidentally produce a mud monster?
Yes, absolutely. I don't see why not. It was a real thing. It was a real threat. No one really knew. I mean, look, what have we had this week? We've had Oppenheimer, fever gripped the nation. And it was probably the same back then as well. It was just sort of saying, well, look at what they did over in poor Japan. It's sort of like, well, who knows what's going to happen now? It's all atomic, isn't it? And now you look back on it, and it's sort of like, well, we don't really have to deal with that fear, really.
I liked the way that it really sort of rattles on about radiation a lot. And you can tell that it's written by people that have no idea what radiation is.
Exactly.
The science of this is all over the place. It's a bit like Hollywood's grasp on the computer these days, where you've got those horrid little beepy things that nobody uses a mouse with. It's the same kind of thing. It's all very... back to Star Trek, I suppose. It's very Star Trek kind of science, where they just try and baffle you with big long words and silly Meccano sets and hope that they can get away with it.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. I want to know how much money they spent on Meccano for this film, because they use it in almost every set and every scene. There is a ton of Meccano, and it was just I was just kind of marveling at the ingenuity of it, and just going, it looks cheap because it is cheap, but it's effective. What he was using it for, it worked. So it's sort of like, use what you've got, pal.
Between that and the lead-lined pedal bin, that's where all the budget is.
I know. The smallest. But did you also, it's the smallest lead-lined bin ever, but he also calls it the most expensive lead-lined pedal bin ever.
He's forever
Wonderful.
putting things out in it and getting things out of it. You just think, man, leave the pedal bin alone.
Just leave it in there and you're safe.
He's protecting his investment. He needs to get his money's worth.
He does.
He does, yeah. He's already broken one radio. Going back to what you were saying, though, Kev, about the inconsistencies about the depiction of radioactivity. Again, I think watching it with to the 21st century sensibilities, radiation is a very depressing subject for a film, and it doesn't work, obviously, like this. And I remember, there's those slew of films in the 1980s, and in a previous iteration when I was researching something else, I went through a lot of them. And I'm not talking about sort of Threads and The Day After, which are the ones that are popular. There's another slew of ones. Basically, there's a particularly depressing film featuring Kevin Costner, a very young Kevin Costner, called Testament. A very heartbreaking scene where his young baby ends up dead in a drawer. Yeah. And that's about a town that is basically engulfed by a radioactive cloud, and it just basically kills people in the slowest and most horrible way possible. And, it's not really fodder for a B-movie monster picture, which is, what we get here.
Normally it's not very quick.
No, and it's awful. It's not, but not awful in a kind of, he's been melted by a Fred Leakey special effect. It's like awful as in the worst possible way to die. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's no denying that if we're comparing this to Quatermass, which we seem to do, we're going to have to do quite a lot, I think. I mean, Quatermass, the creature in that, it was a lot more urgent and it killed things a lot quicker. But then, radiation, maybe, I mean, Quatermass, the alternate title was the Creeping Unknown. This should have been the Creeping Unknown.
Yeah.
X the Creeping Unknown. That would have been a lot better because it tells you right in the title then it's a bit slower.
Actually, thinking about it, Smokey, you're talking about it and comparing it to Quatermass. Don't forget that we've actually got a similar kind of body count to what we've already had last year, because he starts off with popping soldiers off left, right and centre and children and nearly gets the little girl that everybody just leaves outside the church and then forgets about.
I'm sorry, but that little kid's dead. I mean, I would say the little actor, she was so cute, but and it's rare I say that about child actors because they usually used to annoy me very much like Smokey. But I really like that child. But she's like within like fingernail touching distance of the dreaded mud monster. She's waking up tomorrow burnt to a radioactive crisp. If you follow the lore of the film that we've seen thus far.
Yeah, but if you think about it, sort of from a moral standpoint. They kill the child who was being naughty, the child who is holy within a church. They save. It's a morality standpoint. That's exactly why they did that.
What do you think? Is the mud monster grown a conscience? Is that what you're saying?
No, the scriptwriter has a conscience.
I don't know. I like to think he's got a radioactive conscience.
Well, I mean, the monster, we're guessing, has come from up there somewhere, and that's
down below.
Down below.
From down below. It's there
you go. It's got to do with the church. Then I don't know, but
according to the Doctor's ridiculous theory, it's the primordial or whatever you want to call it.
I missed that.
It's been there since the Earth was cooling billions of years ago.
Yeah, and every 50 years it comes a bit closer to the surface, and because of the way that we orbit. And it's like, again, it's one of those things where he comes out with these crazy flights of fancy, and thank God you've got the controller there to just calls him out on it and goes, no, that's rubbish.
Well, all I'm saying is that we should really point out is that not only a higher body count, but a higher on-screen body count.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you've got to imagine that they're trying to up the horror a little bit.
Well, good sequel fodder, isn't it? That's what we talk about, don't we? Yeah, it's one of the rules of the sequel. It's got to be more, and they've got to be gorier, and it definitely goes for that. One thing I would say, just as we're discussing the pit that the monster emerges from, is that I do like the fact that the military plan to deal with a pit that they have already said they think is bottomless is to throw dynamite down it. How is that going to help if you yourself believe that the pit has no bottom? How is throwing dynamite down it and flamethrowing it going to help anything? Kevin, you appear to have a point here.
Yes, I do have a point with this, because if that doesn't work, they were going to concrete it over. Exactly how much were the
concrete do you fill a bottomless pit with?
Yeah. I mean, how many days are they going to do? Because at one point, Royston says, in one of his crazy bad Quatermass ways, he says 10,000 gallons of oil would be pretty big, wouldn't it? This could take up the shape it chooses to. And you're thinking, on those lines then, if he's thinking it's 10,000 gallons, they're going to need way more than that in concrete for a start to fill this bottomless pit. How many wagons are they going to just have parked there? Steady rotation trying to fill it.
Yeah, but this hasn't gone away. You know what I mean? So think of it. The first thing that came to mind was evolution. And when they say, oh, what are you going to do with the aliens? Oh, we're going to hit it with napalm. And they say, well, you don't know what it's going to do to that thing. And they say, oh, well, we're going to do it anyway. It's kind of the same.
Yeah.
It hasn't changed, but 50 years later, it's still
if it
there.
moves, kill it.
Well, but as a species, that is what we tend to do, though. We
Yeah.
haven't really got any plan B.
Independence Day. Oh, we're just going to shoot a missile at it, and it's like, well, how do you know what that's going to do? It's just it doesn't change. So it doesn't surprise me they thought of oil and then concrete and dynamite. It's just sort of like, well, they've run out of ideas, so they're just going to try and kill it.
4 rounds rapid.
One of the differences from Quatermass is it's more of a sort of ensemble cast of problem solvers. So you've got Dr. Royston in that role, but he's not really acting alone. And I did quite like the chemistry he has with he's sort of he's not really a second in command. He's some kind of bizarre. Hang on, I made a note of exactly what he is. He's he's an atomic energy division inspector policeman type thing.
Oh, that was Mac, wasn't it?
Yeah, Mac, Rumpole of the Bailey. Yeah,
but he calls him Mister. He doesn't even call him Inspector or anything like that. He says, "Oh no, just call me Mister." I liked seeing Rumpole in this.
I do like the continuation of yet another weird Hammer sort of detective who isn't replacement but is for some reason in charge of investigating this series of crimes.
Yeah, it was Alan Wheatley point 2.
Yeah,
wasn't it?
Yeah,
it was. Yeah, it was just he was there to try and help, but he not in a fully official capacity.
Yeah, I'm not really here.
Yeah,
but at one point he actually flashes his idea of policeman, and suddenly he's got cleared, ticket to do wherever he wants. Yeah,
it's like his library card or something. Oh yes, absolutely, sir. Do come
psychic paper
into this crime scene.
But something I really like though, there's a part in the film where Max says, "Oh, he can't stay. He's been called back to, I think it was London or somewhere."
Yeah,
and he says, "I have to go," and Dr. Royston just sort of says, "Well, I'm actually really sorry you're leaving because you've helped me and you've believed me and you want to get this scene to the end." Can you imagine from the last film? Can you imagine Quatermass saying that to anyone?
No.
Oh God, I can't. So Royston is instantly a lot more human.
Well, they have a
bit caring.
They have a bit of a Holmes-Watson thing going, which I really liked as well. They're bouncing. There's obviously a sort of a hierarchy to it, but it's a respectful hierarchy, and they respect each other's opinion. And actually, I thought that element of it was the most watchable bit of the film. Was I enjoyed watching McGill and Royston do their thing together. I'd watch more films with those two investigating bizarre atomic occurrences.
Things. I always think of him as being like what's the word? He's like the surrogate of Jack Hawkins as Lomax in Quatermass, where McGill is the calming influence, even though he doesn't need to be as calming, because this guy is just nowhere near as bad as Quatermass. But at one point he says, "I'm not entitled to have opinions, I'm only interested in facts." And I think that pretty much nails his character. He's just wanted to get to the bottom of it. And it's quite interesting how they work well together. And it's odd that you've got these two middle-aged guys, well, middle-aged, kind of closing in on elderly, that obviously can't do any action. So you end up with this third member of the team, which is Peter. I think it's Peter Elliott, the guy's the controller guy's son. He seems to be on some sort of death wish. He's like, "Yeah, do you want to jump down a pit? Yeah, go on, I'll do that. Do you want to go close to the edge and drive closer to the edge with the radioactive material on your car? Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, madness."
There's a scene between them two which I loved, which is when the thing has exploded in his lab and it's kind of left, the detritus everywhere and the slime everywhere. And Peter gets it on his hands and Royston just sort of calmly goes, "Oh yeah, it's everywhere." So he says, "But there's a towel over there. go and wipe your hands off. And he gets the towel and he goes, oh, don't bother wiping your hands off. It just goes away in a bit. And it's like, well, then why tell him where the towel was?
But also, shouldn't people be concerned about this bizarre alien substance that just can't be removed but also disappears? You know, in it where they're so concerned about everything else being radioactive, I might be mildly concerned about the substance that's all over my hands as well.
But again, sci-fi rules. Royston just goes, don't worry, it's totally harmless. And it's like, oh, okay, I believe you.
I've licked it, it's fine, don't worry.
I've had it on toast.
What he doesn't realise that they're all going to be dead by 1955 of cancer.
Well, that would be interesting. Wasn't that a year ago?
1965, all right.
It took them back in time.
They are.
Oh my God!
That's why the unknown.
It's X the reknown. Yeah. Now, Smokey, you picked up on a point there, or you skirted around it, and I'm going to pick up on it. And I can only apologise to Kev, who has had my apology in advance for the fact that I was going to mention this. But there is a scene in this film, right? Mm-hmm. Now, I know Ghostbusters 2 comes up more often than it should, but there is a scene in this film that is undeniably has to have been an influence for Ghostbusters 2, because the scene is almost identical. Yep. And I've never seen any other film with a scene like it.
Nope.
So the scene in question, we have the crack that's opened up in the ground where the squidgy mud monster comes out. And as was mentioned before, I think it would be a great idea to lower someone into it using a sort of an A-frame and a winch. Yep. Have a bit of an investigate. And it is identical to when Ray is lowered into the crack in the ground in New York and finds the river of slime. Even some of the lines are the same. Mm-hmm. So I found that bizarre, but also brilliant.
Yeah. Yes, we should point out to the people who don't know is that Ben and I are both huge fans of Ghostbusters 2, and Kev isn't.
Not so much.
Because, as Ben would say, he's a joyless wonder.
And it tends to get on Kev's nerves a little bit just how often I bring Ghostbusters 2 into debates about films that, to the untrained eye, may not have many connections.
Oh, they are. They're everywhere.
But then you realise that they've got a film from 1956 that they're completely homaging, with air quotes all over the place. Yeah.
But genuinely though, it has to have been the influence for that scene, because it's the same.
Yeah, agreed.
How odd. Anyway,
we should point out though that there is a really good jump scare in that moment. When something catches his hand and he's not quite sure, and then he just suddenly looks and there's a skull there. That was a brilliant. I mean, can you imagine being in a cinema in the 50s and that happens? Your popcorn would hit the ceiling. Well,
plus the claustrophobia, the fact he's down the crack and he senses the mud.
The
mud. Well, that's where he is, and he senses the mud monster coming, and they have to sort of. They have to use the winch to get him out, and obviously we've all seen Ghostbusters 2, so we know
the hand crank.
but they're furiously cranking him out of this before the radioactive mud monster can burn him to a crisp. But it's all very tense for a moment.
Yeah, it is. That's a great scene.
They wouldn't have had to furiously crank him up if they'd have been, a bit less than half-arsed when they were dropping him down
letting
there.
Him drop down, yeah.
Just letting him drop down about 2.5 miles before they got the rope and went, hang on a second.
It's fine, it's bottomless.
Fine.
There's no end, he can't hit anything.
Just the walls on the way down.
Fine. He volunteered.
Gave him a magic sponge.
Exactly.
So Scotland as a setting, anyway, we've touched on this. Sort of we've seen Dick Barton save Blackpool, and now we've seen Dr. Adam Royston save Inverness at the end of this film. So the question is, which major British conurbation will be saved from total destruction next? But the setting, though, bit of a, considering that half of the cast were required to put a Scottish accent on that they clearly didn't have, it was a little bit of an odd choice, I thought. I mean, there are plenty of parts of rural England that would have done the same. Not that I have any problem with the film being set in Scotland. I just thought it was a bit of an odd decision to then force an accent on some of the characters who clearly couldn't manage it.
Yeah. But especially when it was filmed at Beaconsfield Gravel Pits, which is 4 miles away from where they actually live anyway. So, what?
if you look close enough over the back, there's a starving man tent. Yeah.
To be fair, though, I mean, the locations they used were good, and
agreed.
Yeah.
you know, I've got no problem with them, especially the opening scene. As again, I'll go back to that, which was, you know, their army doing a training exercise looking for radioactive materials, which I thought was kind of a decent way of opening the film because and they got in the exposition in really quickly in the first sort of 5 minutes, and it was like I thought it was pretty solid. So I mean, but you're right though. I mean, it makes no sense to say it in Scotland. I mean, just as you say, just pick a sparsely populated area of England, and you'd have just the right amount of success. We'd probably better because the accents would have been more on point.
And Inverness is not anywhere near as flat as Beaconsfield.
No. Picking up on what you said there, I thought the film did really well to get the exposition points in without making it feel too clunky, because there was quite a lot of talking about sort of atomic energy and, you know, Geiger counters and all that, and I thought it actually did pretty well. I would definitely give it some credit for that.
Yeah, I love the fact that all this film takes place because you've got one bloke that didn't want to miss out on his one go of the Geiger counter.
Yeah, and he was the one that discovered it all.
Yeah.
And then got
Granted, he died for it, but still.
Yeah, well.
His mates would have killed him anyway because they all wanted to go home.
Yeah, they wanted their dinner.
Yeah.
So I was just looking at what he was called because they could have named the mud monster after him. He was called Lansing.
The Lansing monster.
The Lansing X. Yes, it sounds something different. Before we get to our thoughts, let's see what some reviewers of the day thought of X the Unknown. And we start with the Kinematograph Weekly from August the 16th, 1956, which refers to it as gripping science fiction. The picture builds up big suspense and ends spectacularly.
From November of 1956, from Films and Filming, we get a welcome change from interplanetary yarns.
The London Times, on the other hand, in September of 1956, just went with vastly entertaining.
The Daily Telegraph from September the 27th had slightly more to say. X the Unknown is one of those scientific horror comics, this time made in Britain. Instead of things from outer space or from 20,000 fathoms, we have a thing from a Scottish bog, and we all know how horrible they can be. Anyway, half a dozen people are broiled before a scientist, Dean Jagger, finds the answer, and the monster rolls back into the bog with a bang and a whimper. "What was that?" cries somebody, as there comes a second bang. That, decides the scientist after thought, shouldn't have happened. Good, grisly fun.
From October, we have Variety, who say X the Unknown, a highly imaginative and fanciful melodrama with tense dramatic overtones. It also praised the film for being made with creditable slickness and for telling a story which is completely absorbing, though totally unbelievable.
And finally, the critic for the News Chronicle agreed and said the plot convinces us less by trick horror effects, bowel-loosening though these often are, than by the fact that it has been admirably acted.
I think we've discussed our radioactive mud monster quite enough, so I think it's probably time to think about a rating. I've got a question, as is my way. I've got a question for you, but we'll maybe save the question right till the very end. So let's just have a little bit of a summary of your thoughts and a rating out of 10. I will go to Kevin first.
Okay, right. Have you heard of the Asylum films?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. They do movies based on an original IP without getting sued back
Snakes on
into
a Train.
oblivion. Yeah, by kind of dancing around with the same IP, but not quite. Ape versus Monster, Titanic 2.
Yeah.
I'm beginning to think that X the Unknown is the actual birthplace of Asylum films because this is where they've got their business model from. Because X bears so many Quatermassisms, I'm surprised that they got away with it. I mean, you've got unknown shapeless intelligence that grows ridiculously fast and kills on contact. You got a screaming nurse, again. You got middle-aged blokes stood around looking at deadly things while all the cannon fodder deal with it. Less ability to communicate on a human level than Marvin the Martian. From your lead character, you got a decent body count, and you got leaps of logic that should really see them being given some pills and sort of have a bit of a lie down. So yeah, X the Unknown is a poor retread of an existing property. It's like giving Rob Zombie the go-ahead to make Lawrence of Arabia 2 and ignore the plot holes. 6 out of 10.
Smokey?
Wow. Something we haven't really touched on, although Kev just mentioned it there in his roundup, is Dean Jagger.
Mm-hmm.
I personally think he has got 10 times more charisma and charm than Brian Donlevy. I think he's just a good actor, and he was given a bit of a dodgy script, and I think he dealt with it really well. And I don't think I've actually seen him in anything before, but I thoroughly enjoyed what he did in this. Not as good as Quatermass by a long shot, but as I mentioned at the start of this of the roundtable, that I get it. I get what they were trying to do, and I'm glad it isn't Quatermass 2. But I think as a testing the water of another sci-fi horror for Hammer, it does enough. And I thought maybe that the start was a little slow, and obviously the explanations of the the hows and the whys is kind of lacking. You can only go so far of, well, I'm a scientist, here's what I think, it's true, believe it. There's only so far you can go with that. But that last half hour I really enjoyed, with them working out a way of killing the thing, but also is the way they work out a way of killing the thing, and then it doesn't work, and then they go, but will it still work? And he goes, well, no, you just saw it fail. And they went, well, we're going to try it anyway. And I just kind of like that foolhardy, right, we've got an idea, let's just run with it.
It's very, very British, isn't it? It
is,
won't
actually
work, but let's do it anyway.
Actually, yeah, it is. That's why we've ended up with HS2. So it has a lot of issues, but the sum of its parts I've really enjoyed. And I would actually just like to give, we mentioned him briefly, Peter Elliott, played by William Lucas. The scene where he's in the Jeep trying to get away from X the Unknown.
He's going for the Oscar, isn't he? In that scene? Yeah.
It was, come on, William, this is the BAFTA, and it was just he's
proper crying.
Yes, and I felt for him. I was like, oh, you poor. and I was actually genuinely impressed by this scene and the way the tension ramped up. I thought it was really good. As I say, it's not perfect, and it's a silly B movie, bit of hokum, but it is not unenjoyable at all. So I'm going to give this a 7. It's just a bit more than Kev, but it's a good fun B movie from Hammer. How about you, Ben?
Well, just to return to a point that Kevin made, I'll just say my favourite Asylum title, the most audacious one, I think, is Transmorphers, which I'm very fond of. Them not caring and hoping that the Transformers people come after them. I mean, going back to a point I made right at the beginning of when we were talking, I think had I seen these the other way around, I may have been slightly more sympathetic to this than I am. But in other ways now, I just think of it as a much sort of it's a lesser property than Quatermass, and I don't enjoy it as much, largely because as I said, the monster this just doesn't do it for me. The other criticism I'd have, though, that we haven't touched upon, is that there are no female characters of note at all in this. It is a total sausage fest.
True.
And that really sort of, I think that takes away, I've just, having compared it to other sort of 50s B movies where, I'm not saying there need to be a love interest or a love story, but, I just think it's very, very procedural and male, there's no story around the main story, and, and an introduction of some characters and possibly a couple of female characters to help sort of flesh that out would have been good. But yeah, it's fine, isn't it? I mean, I would say it does pack a bit of originality actually into something that's almost a complete rip-off of something else. I've not really ever seen a radioactive mud monster in anything else, and as I say, if I'd have been an audience member of the 1950s, it may have impacted on me slightly more. So yeah, I think I'd actually probably give it a 6 as well. So okay. Yeah, we're all there or thereabouts. But before we go, speaking of monsters, okay, no, this is a rather than me trying to be funny just for once in my life and failing, this is actually a genuine question. Can you think of a form that a movie creature or monster has not yet taken? So here we have mud. Can you think of like a natural form using, I don't know, elemental or whatever that we've never seen? Because I am really struggling to think of anything that hasn't yet been utilised by Hollywood.
Yeah, because I suppose if you think like sort of like rock, we've seen rock monsters, or trees, we've seen tree monsters, waters, we've seen water monster, fire.
Yeah. There's even the wind. The wind in The Happening it's a wind monster.
Yeah. A snow. I mean, we've seen snowmen kill.
Yeah, Jack Frost.
Yeah, or avalanches we've seen. Wow, that's a really good question.
I just think every possible thing that can be turned sentient has been turned sentient. Compost heap.
Grass? Composting?
Grass monster. Right, write that
We
down.
haven't seen grass kill anyone, have we?
I can't. There's all those sort of Nature Strikes Back films of the 1970s, sort of where it isn't necessarily grass itself, but
But then even like you translate from nature into animals, you think we've seen everything there as well? Haven't we?
Yeah. I mean everything. From rabbits
killer bees, killer wasps, killer
ants,
birds, tigers, lions. We've seen them all. Giraffe. Have we seen a killer giraffe?
Well, there's the property that we need to focus our efforts on.
Yeah. Well, at least they'd fit down that hole.
How deep is this hole in giraffes?
So there we go. Those are our opinions. We invite our listeners to let us know if they agree with us. And if you don't, then just keep it to yourself. If you do want to get in touch, all the relevant details are in the show notes. And please take note of our new email address.
Do you want to say if you sent if you sent an email to the old address, we didn't get it?
I'll just include you saying that. Next time, we will regale you with stories of love, violence, women's prisons, and who knows, we may just get around to talking about a film too. So, until then, from me, Smokey.
From me, Cev Moore.
Also me, Ben Tillerson.
And of course, our Ingrid. We wholeheartedly thank every single one of you, regardless of how long you have been on this journey with us, and hope you will come back next time through the doors of the House of Hammer.